For 20 years, nobody knew why he stopped. Mid-song, mid-tribute. The Frank Sinatra Tribute Concert, 1974. NBC live broadcast. 12,000 people in the arena, 40 million more watching at home. Dean Martin walked on stage to sing My Way as the closing tribute to his closest friend. He sang one verse, then he stopped. Put the microphone down on the piano, carefully, deliberately, the way you put something down when you've decided you're done with it and want everyone to understand the decision is final. Walked off stage. The orchestra kept playing for 4 confused bars before the conductor turned around and realized Dean wasn't coming back. The conductor's arms slowed. The musicians followed. 12,000 people sat in the silence that followed the music, waiting for something they didn't receive. NBC cut to commercial. Backstage, nobody approached Dean immediately. There was something in the way he had walked off, not angry, not distressed in any visible way, just finished, that told the people who knew him that questions should wait. The questions waited 20 years. In every interview between 1974 and 1994, Dean Martin gave the same response when the Sinatra tribute concert came up. Said he hadn't been feeling well that evening. Said it was a personal matter. Said nothing more, in the specific way that said everything except what it meant. Frank Sinatra said even less, one sentence in one interview in 1977. Dean made a choice that night. That's between us. And then not another word about it publicly for the rest of his life. The moment lived in the space between what happened and what it meant. Television specials replayed the footage, that final verse, the microphone going down, the empty stage, the confused orchestra. Biographers devoted pages to it. People who had been in the arena that night described the silence in different ways, all of them arriving at the same conclusion. Something real had happened, something that mattered, and nobody knew what it was. The rehearsals had gone perfectly. 3 times that afternoon, Dean had run through My Way in the empty arena with the orchestra, full voice, all the way through. The conductor, a man named Arturo Bellini, who had worked with both Sinatra and Martin across 20 years, said later that Dean's voice that afternoon had been exceptional. Not just technically, but emotionally present in a way that performers sometimes are in rehearsal and sometimes aren't, and when they are, you notice it. The television special itself was one of the largest broadcast events of 1974. The producers had spent 4 months assembling a lineup of Sinatra's closest collaborators, musicians, actors, comedians, and singers who had been in the orbit of one of American entertainment's most defining careers. The evening was designed to be a formal acknowledgement of what Frank Sinatra had meant to American music. Not a retirement tribute, he was still performing, still recording, but a recognition of 25 years at the center of something. Dean Martin was the closing act because everyone agreed, without much discussion, that closing with Dean was the only right call. They had been friends since 1946. They had built the Rat Pack together, had appeared on each other's television shows, had defended each other in the press when the press required defending against, and shown up at each other's difficult moments with the consistency of men who had decided early on that the friendship was non-negotiable. What that looked like in practice was specific. When Sinatra's career had nearly collapsed in the early 1950s, the period before From Here to Eternity, when the record deals were gone and the bookings were drying up, and the press had written him off with the particular cruelty reserved for fallen stars, Dean Martin continued performing with him, continued appearing at events together, continued treating Frank Sinatra as who he was rather than who the press was saying he had become. When Dean's own marriage to Jean ended in 1973 and he entered one of the quieter and more difficult periods of his life, Sinatra showed up in the ways that mattered. A dinner, a call, the specific presence of someone who didn't need the situation explained.
28 years of that. Not the friendship of men who needed each other publicly, but the friendship of men who had decided the other's company was worth something independent of what either of them could provide professionally. If anyone could close the night correctly, it was Dean. The pressure of being the right choice was something Dean Martin was exceptionally good at not appearing to feel. He walked on stage at 11:15. The arena responded the way arenas respond to Dean Martin, warmly, immediately, with the specific ease of an audience that has just been given permission to relax. He smiled at the crowd the way he always smiled, like he'd just arrived from somewhere pleasant and was glad to find them there. Adjusted the microphone, nodded to Bellini. The opening bars of My Way filled the arena. Dean sang the first verse, and now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain, with none of the performance that the occasion might have invited. No embellishment, no charm layered over the top to soften what the lyrics actually said. Just the song, sung cleanly, the way you sing something when the words are the point, and the person you're singing it for already knows your voice well enough to hear what's underneath. Then he stopped. The second verse should have begun. The orchestra was ready. Bellini's hand was in position. Dean Martin stood at the microphone for approximately 4 seconds. Then he placed the microphone on the piano, turned, walked off stage. Bellini kept the orchestra moving for 4 bars by instinct before he understood what was happening. The musicians around him followed his lead, then followed his confusion, then stopped. A production assistant found Dean in the wings immediately after. "Dean, are you all right?" "Fine," Dean said. He looked it. His color was good. His breathing was normal. He didn't have the appearance of a man who was ill. "Then what?" "I'm done for tonight," Dean said. That was the conversation. NBC filled the gap with a commercial break and closed the evening with archival Sinatra footage. The next day, the entertainment press covered the walkout extensively. Health concerns speculated, disagreements hypothesized, everything except what had actually happened, because nobody knew. Frank Sinatra called Dean the following morning. That call has never been described by anyone who was present, because nobody was present. It was a private call between 2 men who had known each other for a quarter century and understood how to talk to each other without witnesses. Whatever was said, the friendship continued unchanged for another 2 decades. They performed together again, spent holidays together, behaved in every visible way exactly as they had before, and neither of them ever explained the concert. In 1994, a musician named Richard Paoli published a memoir about his 40 years in the American music industry. Paoli had been a second violinist in Bellini's orchestra in the 1974 Sinatra tribute concert. The memoir was not widely read. It was the kind of industry book that finds its audience among professionals and serious music historians, and moves perhaps 3,000 copies in its first year before settling into the quiet permanence of library shelves.
200 rooms. That's how many Dean Martin checked out of in one night. Not because of a fire, not because of an emergency, because a hotel manager in Miami Beach looked at Sammy Davis Jr. standing at the front desk with a confirmed reservation and said the words that would cost that hotel everything. "We don't have a room for him." This was 1958, the Fontainebleau Hotel, Miami Beach, Florida, the kind of hotel that defined an era. Marble floors, valet parking, a guest list that included senators and movie stars, and the kind of old money that built half of Florida's coastline. Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. had arrived together, same car, same luggage truck behind them. Both men were performing at the hotel's main showroom that weekend, a benefit performance that had sold out 3 weeks in advance, with proceeds going to a children's hospital fund. The reservation book at the front desk had both their names in it, side by side, booked by the same agent under the same account. The manager checked Dean Martin in without hesitation, slid the key across the marble counter, smiled the particular smile hotel managers reserve for guests whose names appear in newspapers. Then he looked at Sammy Davis Jr. The smile shifted. "I'm sorry, sir," the manager said. "We don't have a room for him." Sammy Davis Jr. had heard this sentence before, in hotels across America, in cities where his name filled the marquee outside, but his skin color emptied the front desk of any willingness to hand him a key. He had performed in showrooms where he wasn't permitted to walk through the front entrance, had been told to use service elevators in buildings where his picture hung in the lobby advertising that night's show. He had learned over years of touring this country as one of its most talented entertainers exactly how to stand when this happened, how to keep his face still, how to absorb the insult without giving the room the satisfaction of watching him break. He began the practiced motion, the slight nod, the turn toward the door. Dean Martin was standing right next to him. He had heard every word. He reached out and put a hand on Sammy's arm. "Wait," Dean said. He turned to the manager. The reservation book was open on the counter between them, both names visible in the same handwriting, the same date, the same account number. "His name's right there," Dean said. Quiet, not loud enough to draw a crowd, but firm enough that the manager understood this wasn't a request for clarification. "I understand, Mr. Martin," the manager said, "but hotel policy regarding—" "I don't need the policy. I need a key for my friend." The manager's expression shifted into the particular discomfort of a man who has said something in front of witnesses he didn't expect to have. A bellhop had stopped moving luggage. A couple checking in at the next station had gone quiet. "I'm afraid that's simply not something I can do," the manager said. Dean Martin nodded slowly, not in agreement, in the way a man nods when he has heard enough to understand exactly what kind of conversation this is going to become. "Then I need to check out," Dean said. The manager blinked. "Sir?" "Check me out, right now. And while you're at it, pull up every room connected to this weekend's performance, the band, the crew, the opening act and their families, the publicity team, the sound engineers who had arrived 2 days earlier to set up the showroom, combined with the guests who had booked rooms specifically to attend the sold-out performance, patrons of the Children's Hospital Fund, society families who had paid premium prices for the privilege of a weekend at the Fontainebleau during the show. The number connected to that single booking exceeded 200 rooms. Dean Martin picked up the house phone at the end of the counter.
"Did you read what Dean did?" Sinatra said. Nancy had read it. 20 years, Sinatra said. "I thought he walked off because something was wrong. Turned out something was right. He just didn't want an audience for it." He was quiet for a moment. "That's Dean," Sinatra said finally. "That's always been Dean." He didn't say anything else about it. The phone call ended shortly after. He never spoke about it publicly. Dean Martin died on December 25, 1995. Frank Sinatra died on May 14, 1998. Neither of them ever commented publicly on what had happened in that arena in 1974, or on Richard Paoli's memoir, or on 4 words spoken quietly into a microphone before it was placed on a piano and left there. Some tributes are made in front of 12,000 people. Some are made in the moment when you realize that 12,000 people aren't the ones who need to hear it, and the man who mattered already knew. If this story about friendship and what it looks like when it doesn't need an audience moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this with someone who understands that the truest things are often said quietly or not said at all. Leave a comment about a friendship in your life that doesn't need to be explained, and ring that notification bell for more stories about the moments behind the moments. In 1974, Dean Martin walked on stage to sing My Way as the closing tribute at a Frank Sinatra concert broadcast to 40 million people. He sang one verse, put the microphone on the piano, walked off. Nobody knew why for 20 years.
In 1994, a musician who had been standing close enough to hear published a memoir. 4 words. He already knows Frank. Dean Martin had decided, standing in front of 12,000 people, that the tribute had already been given, that Frank Sinatra didn't need a performance, he needed a friend who understood that some things don't require an audience. Frank Sinatra read those 4 words in 1994, called his daughter, said he didn't need an audience for it. That was all. Some tributes are made in front of 12,000 people. Some are made in the moment when you realize the only person who matters already knows.